Have you ever wondered why the people who once promised to stand beside you disappear the moment your life becomes difficult? Why those who called themselves your closest friends suddenly become strangers when they no longer benefit from your presence? This question has haunted philosophers, kings, generals, and ordinary people throughout history. The painful truth is that most people misunderstand the nature of human relationships. They expect permanent loyalty in a world where human behavior is constantly shaped by self-interest, fear, ambition, and changing circumstances. People are loyal to their interests first. This statement may sound cold, even cynical, but history repeatedly proves it to be true. Most people believe loyalty is an emotional bond that remains unchanged regardless of circumstances. In reality, loyalty often survives only as long as it aligns with a person's needs, ambitions, comfort, or security. The moment those conditions change, so can their behavior. This does not necessarily make them evil. It makes them human. Every individual is guided by invisible forces: fear, desire, survival, recognition, and personal advantage. These forces quietly shape decisions that emotions alone cannot control. Look carefully at the rise and fall of kings, politicians, business leaders, and influential figures. Many were surrounded by people who pledged lifelong devotion. They received endless praise while they possessed power, wealth, or influence. Yet the moment their fortunes declined, many of those same supporters disappeared or even joined their enemies. Their loyalty was never truly directed toward the individual. It was directed toward the benefits that individual provided. Once those benefits vanished, so did the relationship. This same principle operates in everyday life. A coworker may seem supportive until a promotion places both of you in competition. A friend may celebrate your achievements until your success begins to expose their own insecurities. Even family members can become distant when conflicts over money, status, or inheritance arise. Human relationships are constantly tested by changing circumstances, and those tests reveal motivations that words often conceal. One of the greatest mistakes people make is confusing kindness with commitment. Someone can genuinely enjoy your company today while still choosing themselves tomorrow. They may appreciate your help, your advice, and your generosity, yet when faced with protecting their own interests, they often prioritize themselves. This is not always a calculated betrayal. Sometimes it happens almost unconsciously because self-preservation is deeply rooted in human psychology. Understanding this reality does not require you to become suspicious of everyone you meet. Instead, it encourages you to observe actions more carefully than promises. Listen to what people say, but trust what they consistently do. Real loyalty is measured over time, especially during moments when remaining loyal becomes difficult or costly. Anyone can stand beside you when success is easy and rewards are plentiful. Far fewer people remain when supporting you demands sacrifice, patience, or personal risk. The wisest individuals never assume loyalty simply because someone expresses affection or admiration. They recognize that circumstances reveal character far more clearly than conversations ever will. By accepting that people naturally protect their own interests first, you free yourself from unrealistic expectations and begin building relationships based on understanding instead of illusion. This perspective does not make you colder. It makes you wiser, calmer, and far less vulnerable to disappointment when human nature reveals itself exactly as it has throughout history. Expectations create the deepest disappointments because they build an invisible reality that often has little connection to how people actually behave. The human mind naturally creates stories about relationships. When someone is kind to us, supports us during a difficult time, or promises to always stand by our side, we begin constructing an image of permanent loyalty. We stop seeing the person as they are and start seeing the version we hope they will become. This illusion feels comforting, but it quietly prepares us for pain. The greater the expectation, the greater the shock when reality refuses to follow the script we created in our minds. Most betrayals feel devastating not because the action itself is extraordinary, but because it destroys an expectation we believed was unbreakable. If you never expected someone to protect your interests above their own, their decision would hurt far less. Instead, disappointment grows from the gap between imagination and reality. We suffer more from the story we told ourselves than from the actual behavior of another person. History repeatedly demonstrates this pattern. Powerful rulers often elevated trusted advisors, believing years of service guaranteed permanent devotion. They rewarded them with wealth, influence, and authority, assuming gratitude would ensure lifelong loyalty. Yet when political winds shifted or personal ambition offered greater rewards, many advisors abandoned the very leaders who had created their success. The rulers felt shocked because they mistook temporary alignment of interests for permanent commitment. They expected human nature to remain fixed despite changing circumstances. The same dynamic exists in ordinary life. Friends promise they will always be there, colleagues claim they are part of your team, and acquaintances speak warmly about lifelong bonds. Most of these statements are sincere in the moment they are spoken. However, people change, their priorities evolve, new opportunities emerge, relationships shift, and unexpected pressures influence their decisions. The promise made yesterday may no longer match the reality of tomorrow. This does not always mean the person intended to deceive you. It simply means circumstances often reshape behavior faster than emotions can keep pace. Wise individuals protect themselves by reducing unrealistic expectations rather than demanding impossible perfection from others. They appreciate kindness without assuming permanence. They value trust, but understand that trust must continually be earned through consistent actions. They recognize that affection today is not a guarantee of identical behavior years later. This mindset creates emotional stability because it replaces fantasy with observation. When you stop expecting absolute loyalty, you begin to notice people's true character more clearly. You judge them by patterns instead of promises, by sacrifices instead of speeches, and by consistency instead of emotional declarations. Ironically, lowering unrealistic expectations does not make your relationships weaker. It makes them more authentic because they are built upon reality rather than illusion, allowing genuine trust to grow where it has truly been earned instead of merely imagined. Power changes every relationship because it changes the balance of human emotions, perceptions, and hidden ambitions. Very few relationships remain untouched when one person suddenly gains influence, wealth, status, or authority. People like to believe that friendship exists beyond success and failure, yet history repeatedly demonstrates that power reveals truths that comfort often conceals. When your position changes, the people around you begin to see you differently. Some admire you more than before, some secretly resent your rise, and others remain close only because they hope your success will benefit them. The relationship may appear unchanged on the surface, but beneath it, invisible forces are already reshaping its foundation. Throughout history, rulers have discovered this lesson in painful ways. A leader who rises to prominence quickly attracts supporters, advisors, and companions who seem completely devoted. They offer encouragement, praise every decision, and promise unwavering commitment. Yet power creates opportunity, and opportunity awakens ambition. The very people standing closest to the throne often begin imagining themselves in a stronger position. Loyalty slowly competes with personal desire, and once ambition becomes stronger than gratitude, betrayal is no longer impossible, it becomes predictable. The greatest empires were rarely destroyed only by external enemies. Many weakened because those closest to power pursued their own interests when circumstances shifted. This pattern extends far beyond politics or history. Imagine someone who builds a successful business after years of struggle. Friends who once treated them as an equal may suddenly become unusually supportive, while others grow distant. Some begin asking for favors, financial help, or special treatment. Others compare their own lives with the successful person's achievements and quietly develop feelings of envy. The success itself did not create these emotions. It simply exposed emotions that were always capable of existing under the right conditions. Power also transforms the person who possesses it. Success often creates confidence, but it can also create isolation. The more influence you have, the harder it becomes to distinguish genuine respect from calculated obedience. Many people will agree with your opinions not because they believe you are right, but because they hope to remain in your good graces. Compliments become more frequent, criticism becomes rarer, and honest feedback becomes increasingly valuable. This illusion can convince powerful individuals that they are surrounded by loyal companions, when in reality they are surrounded by people adapting to their position. The wise person understands that power acts like a mirror. It does not invent human nature, it reveals it. Some relationships become stronger because they are built on mutual respect rather than convenience. Others slowly dissolve because they depended on equality of circumstance rather than strength of character. Instead of expecting power to secure loyalty, observe how people behave when your status changes, when your influence grows, or when your position weakens. Those moments expose motivations that ordinary conversations never can, allowing you to understand relationships through actions instead of comforting assumptions, and through consistent choices instead of temporary appearances that often disappear when conditions inevitably change. Emotional dependence makes you vulnerable because it quietly transfers control of your inner peace into the hands of other people. The moment your confidence, happiness, or sense of worth begins to rely on someone else's approval, loyalty, or constant presence, you have surrendered a part of your freedom. Most people never recognize when this process begins. It starts with trust, grows through attachment, and eventually becomes dependence. At that point, another person's choices begin to dictate your emotional state. Their praise lifts you, their silence disturbs you, and their rejection has the power to shatter your confidence. This is not the result of their strength. It is the result of your dependence. Human beings naturally seek connection, but there is a profound difference between healthy relationships and emotional reliance. Healthy relationships enrich your life without becoming the foundation of your identity. Emotional dependence, however, convinces you that you cannot remain emotionally stable without another person's validation. When this belief takes root, fear begins to replace freedom. You become afraid of disappointing others, afraid of conflict, afraid of being abandoned, and afraid of expressing your true opinions if they might threaten the relationship. Throughout history, influential leaders understood that emotional control is often more powerful than physical control. If someone could manipulate your fears, hopes, or need for acceptance, they could influence your decisions without ever using force. Entire kingdoms have fallen because rulers depended too heavily on the approval of trusted advisors, favored companions, or powerful allies. Instead of making decisions based on wisdom, they made decisions based on preserving relationships. Their emotional dependence clouded their judgment, allowing manipulation to replace reason. This same pattern appears in ordinary life. A person who desperately needs a friend's approval may tolerate disrespect that they would never accept from a stranger. Someone who fears losing a romantic partner may sacrifice personal values simply to avoid conflict. An employee emotionally dependent on a manager's praise may work beyond healthy limits while ignoring unfair treatment. In every case, dependence weakens independence. The greater the emotional need, the greater the opportunity for disappointment and control. One of the greatest illusions is believing that constant availability proves loyalty. In reality, people often respect those who maintain healthy boundaries more than those who abandon themselves to please others. When you constantly seek reassurance, you unintentionally communicate insecurity. When your emotional state remains stable, Regardless of temporary approval or criticism, you project quiet confidence that others naturally recognize and respect. Freedom begins the moment you accept responsibility for your own emotional stability, appreciate companionship, but never allow it to become your only source of strength. Value friendship, but do not build your identity upon another person's consistency. Learn to enjoy solitude without feeling abandoned, and learn to stand by your principles even when others withdraw their support. The stronger your relationship with yourself becomes, the less power betrayal, rejection, or changing loyalties have over your peace of mind. Emotional independence does not make you cold or distant. It makes you resilient, self-directed, and capable of forming relationships based on mutual respect rather than fear of loss, creating connections that are healthier, stronger, and far less vulnerable to manipulation when circumstances inevitably change. Respect lasts longer than forced loyalty because respect is rooted in genuine recognition, while forced loyalty survives only through fear, obligation, or temporary advantage. Many people spend their lives trying to make others promise unwavering devotion. They seek constant reassurance, demand agreement, and become uncomfortable whenever someone questions them. Yet loyalty that must be demanded is already fragile. The moment pressure disappears or circumstances change, that loyalty often vanishes as well. Respect, however, follows a different path. It is earned through consistent character, competence, discipline, and integrity. It cannot be commanded into existence, but once established, it has the power to outlast changing emotions and shifting alliances. History repeatedly demonstrates this distinction. Rulers who relied solely on fear surrounded themselves with people who obeyed outwardly while secretly waiting for the opportunity to rebel. Their followers appeared loyal because the cost of resistance was too high. But when those rulers became weak, old, or vulnerable, many of the same followers abandoned them without hesitation. Their loyalty was never genuine. It was merely a survival strategy. In contrast, leaders who earned respect through wisdom, fairness, courage, and self-control often inspired commitment that continued long after their authority had faded. People remembered them not because they were feared, but because they represented principles worth following. The same pattern exists in everyday relationships. A manager who constantly threatens employees may achieve obedience, but rarely earns admiration. Workers follow instructions because they fear losing their jobs, not because they believe in the leader. The moment another opportunity appears, many leave without regret. On the other hand, a leader who demonstrates competence, treats others fairly, and remains calm under pressure creates an environment where people choose to stay. Their commitment grows naturally because it is built upon trust rather than intimidation. Respect also changes the way people respond during conflict. Someone who respects you may disagree with your decisions, yet they still acknowledge your character and intentions. Someone who is merely loyal out of convenience can disappear the moment disagreement arises. This is why respect proves stronger than emotional attachment alone. It survives difficult conversations, temporary failures, and changing circumstances because it is based on a deeper evaluation of who you are rather than what you currently provide. Many people mistakenly believe they can purchase loyalty through endless generosity. They offer favors, solve every problem, and sacrifice their own needs in the hope that others will remain forever grateful. Yet gratitude fades surprisingly quickly when people begin to see generosity as an expectation instead of a gift. The more you give without boundaries, the more your efforts become ordinary. Eventually, what once inspired appreciation becomes something others feel entitled to receive. Respect cannot be bought in this way. It grows when people recognize that your kindness is guided by strength rather than desperation for approval. True respect requires consistency. It is reflected in the person who keeps their word even when doing so is inconvenient, who remains composed under criticism, and who refuses to compromise their principles for temporary acceptance. Such individuals do not chase admiration or demand allegiance. They focus on mastering themselves. Ironically, this self-mastery becomes the very quality that attracts lasting respect from others. While loyalty may rise and fall with changing interests, genuine respect often remains because it is tied to character, and character leaves an impression that circumstances alone cannot erase. When you dedicate your life to becoming someone worthy of respect, instead of someone obsessed with securing loyalty, your relationships become stronger, healthier, and far more resilient against the inevitable changes that every human connection will eventually face. Become so strong that betrayal cannot break you. This is the ultimate lesson hidden beneath every disappointment, every broken promise, and every abandoned relationship. Most people spend their lives trying to prevent betrayal instead of preparing themselves to survive it. They search endlessly for perfect friends, flawless partners, and completely loyal companions. Yet no amount of caution can eliminate uncertainty from human relationships. People change, circumstances change, interests evolve. The strongest person is not the one who never experiences betrayal, but the one who refuses to let betrayal define their future. Inner strength begins with accepting responsibility for your own emotional foundation. When your confidence depends on another person's approval, rejection becomes devastating. But when your confidence is built upon discipline, self-respect, and personal growth, another person's decision to leave no longer destroys your identity. Their actions become information rather than devastation. You learn from the experience instead of allowing it to become a permanent wound. History is filled with remarkable individuals who faced betrayal from those they trusted most. They were abandoned by allies, criticized by friends, and opposed by former supporters. Yet what separated extraordinary people from ordinary ones was their response. They did not allow bitterness to consume their purpose. They adapted, became wiser, and continued moving forward with greater awareness of human nature. Every setback became another lesson in resilience rather than an excuse to surrender. Strength is not the absence of pain. Betrayal will always hurt because trust is valuable. The goal is not to become emotionless or incapable of forming close relationships. The goal is to develop such a stable sense of self that temporary disappointments cannot permanently damage your character. You remain open to meaningful connections while refusing to surrender your independence. Every difficult experience offers a choice. You can become cynical and believe no one deserves trust, or you can become wiser and recognize that trust must be earned gradually through consistent actions. Wisdom allows you to remain kind without becoming naive, generous without becoming exploitable, and confident without becoming dependent. When you reach this level of emotional strength, betrayal loses its ability to control your life. It may disappoint you, but it will not defeat you. You continue building your future with the understanding that your greatest source of security has never been another person's loyalty. It has always been your own resilience, your ability to adapt, your commitment to your principles, and your determination to keep moving forward regardless of who chooses to walk beside you or walk away.